Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramhansa Parivrajacharya Astottara Satashi Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sukho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktarinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. This is a beautiful painting of Srila Prabhupada writing in his diary. So we've been discussing Srila Prabhupada since he's been living. Since he's been living at the Bowery. He moved to the Bowery in April of 1966. And we've gone through April, and now we're going to go through the second half of May, because a lot of things happened in that last, the lowest, subse come. In the meantime, we had discussed, because when Prabhupada first moved to this one. Yeah, subset come. Yes, oh, subset comes back. We had noticed, Srila Prabhupada, when he was writing in his diary, he was using the name Paul Murray for his roommate who lived with him. And in the Lilamrita, Satsvarup Maharaj was calling the young man David Allen. So there seemed to be a discrepancy. So Satsvarup Maharaj, he has been ill for quite some time now. And he normally listens to these classes because, having written the book, he likes to hear how devotees are commenting and adding more research, because it's been now so many years since the book was written. This was published, I think, in 1981. So we've gotten a lot more information since that time. So when Satsvarup Maharaj heard that, in 1981, yes, that there seemed to be some misunderstanding or discrepancy why the names were different, he sent me a letter, and I'm going to read that letter to you because he explains why it is so. I am feeling a little better in my health now, and I am watching your classes and enjoying them very much. So he also listens to these classes. In a very recent class, you pointed out that in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, there are some different spellings of names or different names themselves to Mukunda Maharaj's miracle on 2nd Avenue, and also Prabhupada's diary. I would like to explain, at least in part, why there are some differences in names. When our team was researching and creating an authentic biography of Srila Prabhupada for the BBT, we consulted lawyers. Lawyers means advocates. The reason for this, we were told, is that we should not use the name of some person who might get antagonistic and sue us, make a case against us if we use their name. This was strictly legal advice that we received from several lawyers. One of them told me, quote, "If you use this person's name, it is like waving a red flag," unquote. So this accounts for few different names in the two books, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita and Miracle on 2nd Avenue. I encourage you in your Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita classes, and especially the additional research that you do. Yours in the service of Prabhupada, Satsvarup Das Goswami. So, naturally, the devotees who took initiation from Srila Prabhupada and surrendered themselves, such as Michael Grant, who became Mukunda Das, and Jan, who became Janaki, and those who fully dedicated themselves to Srila Prabhupada, the names weren't changed. But those who did not surrender to Prabhupada and afterwards might become antagonistic, the names were changed. So now we can understand that. So what I would like first to do is catch up on the month, because after May, there are a lot of changes. And just as we know, tomorrow we celebrate the incorporation of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So this month, these 2 months, May and June, are when Prabhupada, in coordination with the lawyer, Stephen Goldsmith, and Carl Jurgens, who called Stephen Goldsmith to make the corporation papers, it's all going on in these 2 months. So we're going to hear day by day how Prabhupada was able to establish the International Society, which was incorporated tomorrow. We'll start with the 12th of May. Today I inquired about registration of the League of Devotees. So Prabhupada had still not named his new association yet. He was calling it League of Devotees. It is understood the expenditure will be about $300, including the lawyer's $200. So for the paperwork, it was only going to cost $100, and for the lawyer, it was going to cost $200. I paid Paul for expenditure, $6, deposited in bank book, bus fare, total expense $16.75. Friday, the 13th of May, he paid Paul, and there was meeting in the evening, but the attendance was poor. Contribution, $4. Saturday, Paul was paid, and in the afternoons, Saturday afternoons, Prabhupada was holding the regular Sanskrit classes So there was meeting at noon, Sanskrit class contribution, again $4. As usual, Dr. Mishra would invite Prabhupada to come and do kirtan at the Ananda Ashram. So Prabhupada wrote, I went to Ananda Ashram, there was kirtan in the evening. 4 letters by airmail posted. One to Prabhupada's friend in Delhi, Chandrasekhar. One to the politician of the Congress Party, Surya Kumar. One to the agent of Punjab National Bank, Vrindavan, where Prabhupada had his account. And one to Atmaram and Sons booksellers, because they were distributing Prabhupada's books in Delhi for him. Sunday the 15th. This was on Ekadasi. The whole day I was in Ananda Ashram. I came back at 5 p.m. Yolanda brought me back by her car. She has promised to come here on Wednesday next. She was one of the students of Dr. Mishra. Monday, 16th May. Today paid Paul for expenditure $350. Received one letter from Mangal Niloy Brahmachari. So in Satsrup Maharaj's Lilamrita, the name was changed. Because Mangal Niloy Brahmachari, he was a Brahmachari of the Gaudiya Mat, and he knew English very well, and he was writing to Prabhupada, encouraged that he might be able to come and help Prabhupada with his preaching in America. Prabhupada was encouraging him, and he also wanted to come. So there were many letters back and forth, and Prabhupada says, very encouraging. He wants to help me in my mission. So out of the entire Gaudiya Mat, finally one person has come forward who actually wants to help Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was writing to his godbrothers. Mangal Niloy Brahmachari was not a godbrother. He was the disciple of one of Prabhupada's godbrothers. And he was ready to help. And because he was an educated young man who knew English, Prabhupada had hope that if he came, he would be able to lead the kirtans and assist Prabhupada. I have replied and assured him to get him here, provided he works here submissively. In the evening, there was meeting. 10 ladies and gentlemen attended. Tuesday, 17th of May. Today, Paul, he was sending Paul out to buy little things that he needed for cooking and small things like that. Staples, envelopes, stamps. Wednesday, May 18th. Today I paid Paul for expenditure $125. In the evening there was meeting of 12 ladies and gentlemen. Contribution $7. One letter received from Atma Singh, Bombay. So Prabhupada had also left some book sets with Atma Singh. He wasn't having much success in sales. Prabhupada had encouraged him that, why don't you extend your sales all over Maharashtra? Prabhupada wrote him a letter like that, and they wrote back, actually, we wanted to return your books because nobody's buying them. They're not religiously interested in Bombay, and your books aren't selling. Thursday, today one letter received from Mr. Paul C. Sherbert, and he has also replied. It's not said who he is. Maybe we'll find out later. Friday the 20th of May. Today I withdrew $25 of Mr. Paul's money and delivered to him. $25 in full. Purchased 1 box of stapling. It is calculated today that after expenditure up to date, the balance is $22 out of all contributions in the meeting. Mr. Office in his name. Mr. Raphael wants to sell books. I have given him instructions. Raphael was one of the young men who was attending Prabhupada's classes. He didn't take initiation, but he did help with the incorporation. He was one of the trustees. Let me see what he can do. In the evening there was meeting, and although the attendance was with 10 men, The collection was only $4. Saturday, May 21st, Paul was paid $125 for expenses. In the afternoon, there was Sanskrit class. The attendance was 10, but the collection was only $4. So originally, when Prabhupada was at 72nd Street, he had requested all of the students who came to give $1 for whenever they attended the classes. But now that he was down at the Bowery with a different set of young men and women, they were musicians, they were artists, some of them didn't have jobs, they were just coming out of curiosity. So his collections were quite down. But then Prabhupada, even 2 weeks earlier, he wrote, "It doesn't matter, at least they're coming and the numbers are increasing." One boy paid for the books, partly $6. At 5:30 p.m., because being a Saturday, we started for Ananda Ashram. Paul's landlady came for rent. Now this is a very unhappy thing that happened. We'll read tomorrow. He has kept with him $75, and I will have to return the balance of collection $25 on Monday to him. In the evening there was kirtan at ashram. It was nice as usual. There was dance of Baliram. Now Sunday, both Paul and we were at ashram the whole day. We came back at 8 p.m. It is seen that somebody came in. That means someone broke into their room. Paul says the door was open. There was electric table lamp on. And later on it was found that on a paper he has left one note with chalk. They wrote on the paper, "Blessed." It is mysterious. And later on it was found that the $75 which was kept in Paul's drawer is taken away. So that was the rent money that there was when he was at 72nd Street and his room was broken into, his tape recorder, tape recorder and his book bag were all stolen. And from that indication, Prabhupada moved. Now, it's the end of May. Prabhupada had just been there less than 2 months, and already a theft has occurred. It was the worst part of town in New York City. So eventually it had to happen. All of the drunkards lying outside at the doorsteps. The front door was not always locked. So someone broke into their room. We have to arrange for safety, otherwise it is risky to remain here. The ashram paid $10 for our going there, so there was no expenditure. Now things are changing. Now Paul, his money has been stolen. They don't have the rent money. Paul, in the meantime, without Prabhupada's knowing it, has been taking intoxication. So Paul paid $4 for expenditure and $25 for paying rents, etc. In the evening, being Monday, there was meeting. The contribution was $8. The attendant was about 11 ladies and gentlemen. Tuesday the 24th, 2 letters posted, one to Mr. Sherbert and the other to Cambridge University Press. So Srila Prabhupada, he was writing to the publishers who might be interested in printing his Srimad Bhagavatam and his Bhagavad Gita especially. He wanted to get printed. On Wednesday in the evening, there was meeting. The attendance was about 18 people. Very nice, really increasing. A contribution was $11.75. After the meeting, there was consultations about incorporation of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So now here it is, 25th of May. Prabhupada has decided on the name of his society. And some of the students, they asked Prabhupada, well, you're in America, nobody in America knows who Krishna is. Why don't you call it the International Society for God Consciousness? And Prabhupada, he said that, no, God, the word God is too vague. And if they don't know who Krishna is, they come to me and I will tell them who Krishna is. So he kept it as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he got that name from a sloka that Ramananda Roy wrote. That he, we'll hear it tomorrow, the full sloka, when we discuss the corporation. That Krishna Rasa Bhavita, that's 3 words in the sloka. And that is that the perfection of life is to develop your love for Krishna. And if you want that love for Krishna, the price of it is lolyam, or greed. If you don't have a strong desire to attain love for Krishna, then you can engage in spiritual activities for millions of lifetimes, Ramananda Roy says, and you'll never get love for Krishna. Only if you're greedy for that will you get it. So on that inspiration, Prabhupada has now named his society, and later he very proudly announced, we shall call our society ISKCON. ISKCON is what's called in English an acronym. Acronym means like you take a long thing and you abbreviate it. So what Prabhupada did was he took the I from international, the S from society, the K from Krishna, and the CON from consciousness. And that made ISKCON. Thursday, 26 May. Today I went to Dr. Mishra's to dine with him. So Dr. Mishra was still keeping a very friendly relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Although they differed philosophically, they were actually friends. And later we'll hear from Mukunda Goswami's book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue, when Prabhupada, a few weeks later, he invited some of his students from the Bowery to go with him to Ananda Ashram. And it was the first time they had all gone there. And they saw how Prabhupada was interacting with Dr. Mishra's students. In June, Srila Prabhupada will have the first Sunday Love Feast. And Prabhupada told all of the students at the Bowery that you come for this love feast and there'll be feasting and dancing. And no, because Prabhupada would just sit and chant. And he would only serve out a little cut up apple. So everyone was a little, they just couldn't understand what a feast was and what kind of dancing were they going to do. So there, at the Ananda Ashram, they saw Prabhupada dancing for the first time. And he did what was called the Swami dance. This is how Prabhupada taught us how to dance on Sankirtan. You put one foot in front of the other, just as you see pictures of Lord Chaitanya, with the arms up, and one foot, and then the other foot. And so at the ashram, Prabhupada was dancing. And some of the people, they would dance along with him. So then Prabhupada's students from the Bowery and 2nd Avenue, they also began dancing with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada very, very strongly, when he was allowed to speak, he would counter Dr. Mishra's philosophy that God is a person, just as we are persons, but Nityo Nityanam, Eko Bahunam, Yo Vidadati Kaman. That amongst all the eternals, there's one eternal who is maintaining all of the other eternals. And that is God, that is Krishna. So the students of Dr. Mishra would argue with Prabhupada. that that's not what Dr. Mishra taught us. He taught us that we're just like a drop in the ocean, and when that drop falls back into the ocean, it merges into the ocean, and we completely lose our ego. And Prabhupada would explain to them that, yes, we lose our false ego, but we attain our real ego, our real identity as servants of Krishna. So they could not understand Prabhupada's philosophy because they had been trained in impersonal philosophy. But the students of Prabhupada, they understood this personalist philosophy. So they were very amazed to see how Prabhupada was able to counter the impersonal philosophy of Dr. Mishra, but the students could not understand it. So then Prabhupada writes, I saw a good apartment and lecture hall at 218 Park Row, Chatham Square, which is a very, very posh part of New York City. Paul typed practically the whole day. Because Prabhupada was giving his lectures, they were transcribing, so Paul was helping him. In the evening there was meeting. About 15 persons, both ladies and gentlemen, attended. The contribution was only $8.70. Now, this is the big day. Today Paul was paid $1 for expenditure. In the afternoon there was Sanskrit class and about 10 persons attended. The collection was only $6. One boy paid $6 for the book, then total collection $12. Today I did not go to ashram because Carl engaged to me on Sunday 11 a.m. So we've heard of Carl Jurgens. He was a professor and very interested in Oriental philosophy. And Prabhupada would discuss with him privately. He would ask Prabhupada that, does LSD help you in your spiritual progress? And Prabhupada was able to convince him that there's no need for anything artificial for one's spiritual progress. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra and the reading of books such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that is the real process for making spiritual advancement. So sometimes these young men, they would have their own personal questions and they would come to speak with Prabhupada privately. Now, one letter received from the controller of Exchange Delhi. Prabhupada is still making some efforts to get because Prabhupada is still under the impression that Padampat Singhania might help him in the future. It wasn't until June 6th that the letter came, although it was written in May, early May, like May 12th, the letter didn't reach Prabhupada until June 6th, that Mr. Padampat Singhania was no longer interested in building a temple in New York, and he will not be helping you. Now this is what happened that night of 28th May. There was an incident extraordinary. At 10 o'clock at night, when I was typewriting, Paul became too much irritated, and I stopped typewriting. It was unusual due to his abnormal condition. Better to take precaution in future. So what happened was, in this loft, there was a shower where Prabhupada and Paul could both bathe. And Paul, he was taking intoxication. And he was careless. So in the shower, he had dropped a bar of soap onto the floor. And if you drop a bar of soap on the floor becomes very slippery. So Prabhupada, being an old man, he explained to Paul that he requested him to not drop the soap on the ground of the shower because I'm an old man and I might slip and fall. Paul, his eyes got big he became violent, and he actually came to attack Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada very lightly says, incidents extraordinary, but it was a very frightening experience for Srila Prabhupada. So much so that he became afraid to live anymore with Paul. And though Prabhupada doesn't mention it in his diary, that night he took a small bag and he left. And he went to Carl's apartment, which was just around the corner, and he told Carl what happened. And he, in Bengali, that you become a student of a guru, and you learn from the guru, and then you kill the guru, and then you sit in his seat and become the guru. So Prabhupada could understand that Paul, who was outwardly appearing to be very submissive and very helpful, was now becoming like a violent madman, and it was no longer safe to live with him. So Prabhupada requested Carl, I want my own place, I have to get my own place, may I stay in your apartment for tonight? And Carl had a girlfriend. The men and women didn't marry amongst that culture. And she resented Prabhupada staying there. So Prabhupada, he stayed with them for 1 week. They made a little corner for Prabhupada because they had cats and they had dogs and they ate meat and they had illicit sex, all of the things that naturally would make them uncomfortable because Prabhupada would be living in there. And of course Prabhupada was also uncomfortable because he knew that they knew that he didn't agree with their lifestyle, and naturally living in such a condition, Prabhupada was not happy like that. So after tonight, this Saturday, May 28th, Prabhupada became in a very precarious situation. And then, after a week, Prabhupada asked Carl to take him to Michael Grant, who became Mukunda. And it was at that time that Michael became very serious to find a place for Srila Prabhupada to stay. And within that month of June, they were able to find the 26 Second Avenue. And that is why Michael, when he wrote this book, he calls it Miracle on 2nd Avenue. Because this was when, finally, when Michael was able to find a storefront for Prabhupada to have his own temple, and behind the storefront was an apartment where Prabhupada could live. That was when ISKCON actually started. Prabhupada moved in on July 1st, and then on July 11th, the incorporation was signed and sealed by just some ordinary guests. No one had yet committed themselves to Srila Prabhupada. They were attending Prabhupada's classes. But when Stephen Goldsmith came with the papers of incorporation, they agreed to help Prabhupada. Now we'll hear tomorrow, because Prabhupada from the very beginning, since 1922, he had his mission fixed to take this Krishna consciousness all over the world. And then in 1950, as Prabhupada was writing his Back to Godhead magazines, he would write articles about what the steps had to be taken to make the world Krishna conscious. And then finally, in 1953, Prabhupada wrote the prospectus for the League of Devotees in Jhansi. And there were 19 principles, including setting up Varnashram, many different Vedic principles that Prabhupada wanted to establish. He was still in India at the time, and he wanted to make Jhansi his international headquarters. But that wasn't successful either. So Prabhupada had given Stephen Goldsmith that Prospectus of League of Devotees, and Stephen Goldsmith condensed all of those 19 principles into 7 principles to make a corporation for ISKCON. So now Prabhupada was just waiting, and Michael was especially appreciative of Srila Prabhupada more than any of the other visitors. And that's because sometimes, New York City is a very big, dirty city. Just like here, even in this small city of Vrindavan, we have garbage on the roads, and there are animals wandering around, and sometimes the heat is unbearable. So in New York City also, Mukunda, he describes in his book that on the street corners they have these big garbage cans, but they would be all overflowing with garbage, and there would be rats running around, because it was a city teeming with people. And where Prabhupada lived, it was poor people. And trucks 24 hours a day running back and forth on the 4-lane road highways right in the middle of the city where Prabhupada lived. So it was a dirty place, a noisy place. And Prabhupada, so sometimes the young people, they would go out into the country, just like Prabhupada would go to the ashram. And one time, Mukunda and Janaki, Mike and Jan, they went with some friends into the country, and they were staying in just a little cabin, and there was no water in the cabin, so he went next door to get a drink of water. When he went next door, all of a sudden the police came and arrested him, because the people whose house he went into, they were selling narcotic drugs. And just at that time, Michael went into their house when the police arrived. So they handcuffed him and put him in jail for 4 days. And his name went in the newspaper in New York, and all of a sudden, none of his friends contacted him. Nobody would help him get out of jail. And it was only Srila Prabhupada who called him and asked him how he was doing. So at that time, Michael had a great realization that when you're in trouble, you know who your real friends are, and you know who really cares about you. So Prabhupada, at that time, he showed his genuine concern for Michael. And Michael, when he got out of jail, and all of the charges against him, because he hadn't done anything, it was all dissolved, and they let him go free, although he could have been in jail for 20 years for dealing drugs. It was a very serious offense in those days in America. So he immediately became more serious in Krishna consciousness. So he wanted to help Prabhupada, and he was the one who got the 26 Second Avenue. So Tuesday, May 31st, he paid Paul, he bought bitter melon, he had some registration to do with the Indian Embassy. In the afternoon, Mr. Robert Nelson came to see me. I requested him to become a member of the association. So now that Prabhupada has a name, and now that things are going along legally with Stephen Goldsmith, now he's canvassing for members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Robert agreed and paid $20 for the month of June, 1966. This is deposited in the bank. Now these are the buildings that Prabhupada was looking at to get a temple on the 16th floor. I inquired for the Chatham Tower. At present, it is not possible to acquire a room there. It is very much costly affair, but I have a strong desire to acquire a room there. One letter received from the Punjab National Bank Limited, Vrindavan, informing the account number and balance, etc. All right, so now we're going to read. We just had to catch up a little bit. We're just at the part when Michael has started coming. Michael lived on the Bowery. Actually, Michael lived at 110 Bowery, and Prabhupada lived at 94 Bowery. So 94, 96, 98, 100, 102, 104, 106, 108. He lived about 9 houses away from Prabhupada. Just a very easy walk. And he started coming to Prabhupada's classes. He lived on the Bowery in an AIR loft on Grand Street. It was a large loft where musicians often congregated for jam sessions. So because Michael was a musician, and the primary instrument that he played was a piano. You see the piano here in the corner. So musicians, they don't play alone. They always have to have their other people playing with them. Just like when we have kirtan, you don't have kirtan alone, you have it's congregational. So when they would all get together to practice, that was called in English a jam session. And because Michael had a big loft, like twice the size of this room, huge place to live, the musicians would come to his house for these jam sessions. But as he turned more and more to serious composing, because he would also write music, he found himself retiring from the social side of the music scene. His interest ran more to the spiritual, quasi-spiritual, and mystical books he had been reading. He had encountered several swamis, yogis, and self-styled spiritualists in the city, and had taken up Hatha Yoga. From his first meeting with the Swami, Mike was interested and quite open, as he was with all religious persons. He thought all genuinely religious people were good, although he did not care to identify with any particular group. So Michael, he had gone to a Buddhist Swami. He wasn't impressed. He had even, although he came from a Jewish family, he had even gone to see a priest in a church. He waited an hour and a half for the priest to come and meet him. The priest finally came to meet him, and he said, "Please excuse me, I have to leave in 2 minutes. Is there anything I can help you with?" And so he was getting more and more disillusioned, trying to find someone who could help him with his spiritual advancement. So now Mike says, "There was a little bit of familiarity because I had seen other swamis. The way he dressed, the way he looked, older and swarthy, weren't new to me. But at the same time, there was an element of novelty. I was very curious. I didn't hear him talk when I first came in. He was just chanting, because Prabhupada had a half-hour kirtan, and then lecture for 45 minutes or 1 hour, and then another kirtan, and then the prasad distribution. But mainly, I was waiting to hear what he was going to say. I had already heard people chant before. I thought, why else would he put himself in such a place without any comforts, unless the message he's trying to get across is more important than his own comfort?" Prabhupada was living in complete poverty. I think the thing that struck me the most was the poverty that was all around him. This was curious, because the places that I had been before had been just the opposite, very opulent, just like Dr. Mishra. He had a swanky apartment, Riverside Drive, a very expensive part of New York City. He had his yoga studio. He had his big ashram in the country. It was all very opulent. And Prabhupada, he just put a wire up and threw his dhoti over to make a curtain. It's the way we live, And that's how Prabhupada lived in New York City. There was a Vedanta center in Upper Manhattan and others. They were filled with tobacco. They would be smoking pipes. Pipes is like hookahs, small hookahs. That kind of environment. But this was real poverty. The whole thing was curious. The Swami looked very refined, which was also curious, that he was in this place. When he talked, I immediately saw that he was a scholar and that he spoke with great conviction. Some statements he made were very daring. He was talking about God, and this was all new, to hear someone talk about God. I always wanted to hear someone I could respect talk about God. I always liked to hear religious speakers, but I measured them very carefully. You see, in the Western religions, there's a lot of hypocrisy. A person might preach one thing, but their lifestyle doesn't match what they preach. And this is what Michael had experienced in his religious upbringing in America. So he was a little careful, he was cautious when he approached religious people, because first of all, what were they teaching, and were they actually living what they were teaching? When he spoke, I began to think, well, here is someone talking about God who may really have some realization of God. He was the first one I had come across who might be a person of God, who could feel really deeply. So Michael, from the first time he entered into Prabhupada's loft, he was impressed by Srila Prabhupada. So, Prabhupada went to a meeting because his friend, Mickey, who was another musician, Michael just happened to be on a bus one day in New York City, and his friend Mickey was on the same bus. And Mickey told him that, wow, I found a really great Swami, you got to go hear him. He's right on the Bowery, just a few houses down from where you live. And Mickey got out a little crumpled piece of paper and he wrote the address of where Prabhupada was staying in the Bowery and gave it to Michael. And Michael, he said, you got to go see this Swami. So one day, one evening, when Prabhupada was having his classes, Michael decided to go and see. And Michael, first there were like 6 bums sitting on the staircases. They started to curse at him. He had to climb over them. Then he went up the dark staircase, and he could hear the chanting. And then he went in. Prabhupada was leading kirtan. So that was this first impression. The kirtan, and then hearing Prabhupada talk about God. So Prabhupada Michael wanted to meet Prabhupada one-on-one and see what type of a person he was. So this is that experience. A few days after my first experience at the Swami's evening program, I decided to try to see the Swami during the daytime, when there wouldn't be a crowd of other people there. When I stopped outside the entrance to 74 Bowery at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the place was locked. There was no bell or buzzer. I started to call out to the young boy Paul I had met the other day, but the Bowery's 4 lanes of traffic, 2 on each side, it was like a highway, made such a clatter that I would have needed to shout to be heard even if he were standing right next to me. Imitating what I'd seen New Yorkers do sometimes to get attention, what you do is you take a coin and you throw it at the window, and then it makes a sound, and then the person comes to the window. So I fished through my pockets and then started throwing pennies. This is a penny. A penny is worth about, 1 penny it's worth about a little less than a rupee. About 80 paisa. Started throwing pennies up at the 4th story window, hoping Paul would hear me. A hand raised the sash window. To my surprise, it was the Swami who stuck out his head. When he saw me, he nodded and raised 1 finger as if to say, "I'll be right down." I felt embarrassed and ashamed about making such an elderly man come downstairs to open the door for me. Where was Paul? Wasn't he the Swami's assistant or disciple or something? Momentarily, the Swami appeared and opened the door for me. I started with profuse apologies for making him come all the way down. He just shook his head. "This is my duty," he said. "Come on." Turning quickly and holding the front of his saffron robe up with 1 hand, he bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. Prabhupada was 70 years old at that time. It was the first time I had seen him standing. He was short and thin, but with a modestly rounded belly, and he walked with the quick steps of someone half his age. Right behind him, I clambered up the long staircase. The stairway got darker near the top as we moved away from the Bowery. He led me across the dusty sandal-scented loft to a small office situated behind a makeshift curtain of ochre cloth. Ochre it's another way of, it's that dark saffron that Prabhupada would dye his clothes with, that he draped over baling wire. A few of the Swami's robes of the same color also hung over wire, drying in the hot, humid air. An ancient-looking underwood typewriter sat next to a foot-high stack of typed papers. That was Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita he was typing. that occupied most of his workspace. Furnished with only a small dark brown wooden table and 2 chairs, this workspace's windows overlooked the Bowery, admitting an incessant orchestral background of automobile horns, thundering trucks, and swishing cars. Despite being in one of the busiest and noisiest parts of New York, the atmosphere of the loft was peaceful and serene, almost like a small pocket of countryside in the midst of the city. "Please sit," the Swami said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. So now Michael says, "I really enjoyed your program the other night, Swami." "Very nice," he said, smiling. "You must come again." "Yes, I hope to," I said. I paused, not sure what to say next. The Swami gazed steadily back at me. "How long have you been in America?" I asked at last. "Now I think it is almost 1 year." So Prabhupada arrived in September, and now it's May, June. "I'm not sure how long I will stay. I have return ticket." "You mean an airplane ticket?" "Airplane? No, I came by boat. I was given free passage through Indian Steam Navigation Company." "You came on a boat? Wow, what was that like?" "It was very difficult. Rough seas. Twice I thought I would not get here because of my heart." "Your heart?" "Yes, I was attacked with 2 heart attacks. I thought I am dying now." "Man, why bother coming all that way though? I thought a Swami would want to stay in a spiritual place like India." "My spiritual master wanted me to preach in the Western countries. In 1922 he asked me. I was married then, working, busy with family affairs. So now 43 years later I am here." He laughed. "So Better late than never. I thought I should come to America. If American people take seriously my mission, then others will also. So you have a spiritual master? I thought you were some kind of a spiritual master. Prabhupada said, I am not master. I am servant, preaching what my spiritual master has told me. I am not making up anything new, any new philosophy. Everyone serious in spiritual life must have a spiritual master, guru. I've been looking for a guru for a while. What's your guru's name? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. What did he ask you to preach? I asked, intrigued that this elderly Indian man had come to a foreign country on the strength of someone else's suggestion. He asked me to spread Krishna consciousness, he replied. What's that? Krishna consciousness, God consciousness. In this world, we are trying to forget God. We are embracing so many miseries of life. We are suffering. So my mission is to help people remember God. Only then will this suffering stop. We are seeking after so many material things, but our real aim of life should be to understand our spiritual identification and search out our relationship with God, Krishna. Have you heard of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? No, I don't think so. He is an incarnation of Krishna who lived 500 years ago. Actually, my mission is his mission. He predicted that Krishna's name would be chanted in every town, every village of the world. He gave instruction that those born in India should work to benefit others by spreading his mission, by spreading the name of God. So, it's 7 o'clock, and we've only done one page. So after this, what Satsvarup Maharaj is going to do is he's going to set the scene of how Prabhupada is giving his lectures at the Bowery. So he's taking little parts of his lectures. Here, Prabhupada is lecturing. Sri Krishna is just trying to place Arjuna on the platform of working in pure consciousness. We have already discussed for so many days that we are not this dull body, but we are consciousness. Somehow or other, we are in contact with matter. Therefore, our freedom is checked. So Satsvarup Maharaj, he will now describe philosophically what Prabhupada is trying to teach. And Michael being, since we all know Mukunda Goswami, Michael being one of the attendees, we will see this through his eyes. Because Satsvarup Maharaj, he wasn't present at this time, but Michael was present. So we're going to combine these two books so we can understand these next 1 month, May and June, how Prabhupada wound up his activities in the Bowery, how he worked with Carl and Stephen Goldsmith, so that tomorrow, the Incorporation Day, Prabhupada was able to finally establish the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we'll hear about that tomorrow in the temple. Thank you. Hare Krishna.